Hey everyone, welcome in to another daily editorial here on the KE Report. In this daily editorial, I'm diving a bit more into this moratorium in Sweden focused on uranium. I've talked a bit about it, mostly on company updates with District Metals, to keep everybody as up to speed as I could on the prospects of the Swedish government lifting this moratorium, potentially even this year. I'm bringing on a new guest to discuss this topic, Maria Sunér, the CEO of the Swedish Mining Association. So, Maria, thank you very much for taking some time to give us more an inside look on what this moratorium is all about, a bit of a history on the moratorium, as well as what could happen this year, what the government's even been saying about lifting that moratorium. First and foremost, can I get a little background on the Swedish Mining Association, the type of companies that you work with, and how you work with government, please?
Yes, definitely. And thank you for having me here. The Swedish Mining Association has as our members all the active mining companies in Sweden. Sweden is actually the largest mining country in Europe, but compared to Canada, we are pretty small. We have 12 active mines in Sweden today. But we also have among our members all the junior companies that are at least seriously exploring in Sweden, together with many of the technology providers to the mining industry, such as Epiroc, Sandvik, ABB, and others. So that is a bit about who we are, the Swedish Mining Association. And we are often the intermediator between the business and the companies and the policymakers. And we work both on the Swedish level, of course, because to have good conditions for our members in Sweden is our priority. But we also work very much together with the European Union because many of the policies are decided on the European level rather than the Swedish level. So that is a bit what we are doing in Sweden.
Now, Maria, that's why I wanted to bring you on the show, because you are working with the companies and the government, and this is very much a government-focused issue. Can you give us a bit of a background on this uranium moratorium, the history behind it, please?
Yeah, and I think that dates back quite long, actually. In Sweden, it's been since actually the 80s a discussion around nuclear power. There have been a very politicized issue around whether we should have nuclear power or not, whether it should be decommissioned or not. And I mean, the matter of the fact is that Sweden had a huge program to build up nuclear during the 70s and the beginning of the 80s. But still, this has been very, very questioned. And still today, at least 40% of our electricity comes from nuclear. But during the period when this was introduced, the ban against mining uranium, it was also a lot of discussion around nuclear. And we had the Green Party in the government. So it was with those glasses that we would close down our nuclear power that we also introduced this moratorium on mining uranium as a consequence of the fact that we were not going to have nuclear power in Sweden anymore. But this current government has a different view and is very much actively pointing towards that we will need nuclear in the future, and we will also need more nuclear, new built nuclear in the future. And that's why also they think that it's very logical to take away the ban against mining uranium. But I think from the mining sector, actually, it's even more worrying that we see that many of the important critical minerals that we would like to mine in Sweden are connected to mineralizations where you have uranium as well. So I think that is the main task for us, that we would like to have better conditions to be able to take out more materials from potential deposits in the future. And if we can't take out the uranium, it becomes more complicated and not as profitable, of course.
Yeah, you're telling me off mic that currently any uranium in a mining project needs to be treated as waste currently. So that is just a hugely extra cost for companies. What are some of the recent comments out of the government related to possibly lifting of the moratorium?
Yeah, I mean, they are saying that, and they have also started an investigation now that is going to be reported here in Sweden on the 15th of May on actually how to lift the moratorium so that they will put uranium back as a concession mineral into the Minerals Act. And they will also see how this should be handled under the nuclear safety regulation, I think it's called in English, where we sort of regulate the nuclear part of it. So most hopefully, it could be administrated during this year, actually, to lift the ban of uranium in Sweden. I think the government is very determined to do this, even though we also know that given the history in Sweden around nuclear, and it has been a very politicized and polarizing issue for many years. It's also a lot of discussions in media and among the general public when it comes to uranium. And so this is going to be an interesting year to see how this will evolve going forward. But I would say that the government seems very determined that they will do this.
I know it's hard to put a timeline on this, but what sort of news, what sort of comments, any specific government meetings or get-togethers that we should all be paying attention to that could move this process forward?
I think firstly, it's of course the 15th of May when we will have this investigation announced. And the Swedish process after that is that the government will write up a proposition that they will put forward to the parliament. And as it will be summer break in Sweden by then, we will most probably have to wait until the autumn until it can actually be discussed in the parliament. So, in the best of worlds, I think we could see a change starting from the 1st of January 2025. That's at least what I'm hoping for.
Okay. Can you give us a bit of a history then on the uranium industry in Sweden before the moratorium? I have talked to District Metals a number of times. They've been acquiring land that has some historic uranium resources on it, but what did that whole sector look like before this moratorium?
Well, I think that, I mean, Sweden once in history actually mined uranium, not much, but in small amounts in the 50s. So that was really a long time ago. But there has been nothing really mined out of uranium after that, actually. So, but still, I mean, Sweden had a quite lively nuclear technology sector, actually constructing the nuclear reactors ourselves. And we have a factory for nuclear fuel here in Sweden. So, I mean, we have had a lot of competence and a lot of activities around nuclear and also uranium in Sweden. But I would say that we have gradually sort of dismantled that knowledge because not only that we banned uranium, but also before that, it was actually a sort of a ban on research around nuclear for many years when it was perceived that Sweden would decommission all the nuclear power we had. So we've created a lot of hurdles in actually developing an industry around nuclear and uranium in Sweden. But our hope is that this will restart now if the ban is lifted, and also with the new direction that the government is taking around nuclear power, where we see that they are very determined that this is part of the future for Sweden.
Okay, so let's talk on more on the company front then. If or when this moratorium is lifted, how quickly could companies get more active, build up the knowledge base, and move some of these assets that are already proven, or even explore for assets, move that forward?
Yeah, I think it could move quite quickly because we know that we have several companies that are interested in looking at uranium. And we also right now see an increased interest here in Sweden for exploring the Swedish bedrock. I mean, we know that we have a very interesting bedrock, but it's very underexplored. So I think it's a lot more to actually discover in Sweden. So my hope is that we will see these projects develop, and if it's possible to take uranium out as one of the byproducts, it will be much easier also to find the economy in several of these projects. That is something I'm quite convinced.
So, Maria, let's focus a bit more on the assets that have already had some work done, have, let's say, a historic resource on it. What sort of work would companies have to do to bring these back on maybe the global map for the uranium sector?
I mean, definitely, it's important to have the knowledge around each project on what you actually have in the ground. But once you have that and think you have a good project, the next step is to go forward and applying for a mining concession that sort of secures this resource for the company. And after that is approved, the normal environmental permitting process is you continue with the normal environmental permitting procedure. Then it will be more like any other mining project here in Sweden.
Well, Maria, you know what? I'll follow up with you as we get more comments or anything, any other news out of the government, out of the country on this moratorium. I do thank you for taking some time and sharing your thoughts and some of the history on this moratorium. Hopefully, there is more for us to talk about, especially after that May 15th meeting. So, Maria, again, the CEO of the Swedish Mining Association, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.